Bobby Witt Jr. was not an MVP finalist in 2025. Do we feel that he got snubbed? We'll tell you in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jac Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That is at JOHNYJ_15. And you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. For you first-time listeners wondering how often we post on this channel, I go Monday through Friday, 30-minute episodes in length. We will go down to 3 episodes a week around January to February, but that won't be for a long time as spring training will be right around the corner, which means we will jump back up to 5 episodes a week. Before we dive into today's show, I want to tell you that the title sponsor is Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. I know we were teasing that we were going to talk about an article involving some free agents that might be linked to Kansas City. I want to save that for tomorrow because we do have some more headlines involving the Royals. So we'll save that more for tomorrow's episode, probably lay out the show a little bit differently. But I did want to touch on the MVP finalists. I did want to talk about Alec Marsh and definitely about Vinnie Pasquantino and Jac Caglianone playing for Team Italy in the WBC. So it started off here with the MVP finalist. It came out yesterday. Aaron Judge, surprise, surprise. Cal Raleigh, surprise, surprise. And Jose Ramirez were the top 3 for the American League. My vote would unfortunately go toward Aaron Judge, I would say. It feels like it's been split in the comments before because Cal Raleigh is so easy to root for. He's one of the more fun players to watch in all of baseball. I've always thought if Aaron Judge wasn't a New York Yankee, I feel he'd be viewed entirely differently in how those numbers stack up against other players. Aaron Judge is a generational talent. Cal Raleigh is one of the best catchers that we've ever seen. And I don't want my words to get twisted here because the Royals and Guardians, I guess you could call them rivals in their own division. I have nothing but respect for Jose Ramirez, even though he plays for Cleveland. You know, he's a Royal killer. Maybe that's where if you were a Cleveland fan listening, you'd say, well, you're, making points against J-Rom because he plays for Cleveland. I believe he is one of, if not the most underrated player in the sport. The Royals will never be able to get him out. And he is the heart and soul of that franchise. For a long time, it was Francisco Lindor and Jose Ramirez. People always turn to Francisco Lindor. Not really his fault or J-Rom's fault. He's the shortstop. And Jose Ramirez was a third baseman. But you look at the numbers year in and year out, he is by far and away the most underrated player in the sport. But now we can almost shift that attention, now that Jose Ramirez is 33, to maybe Bobby Witt Jr. Now, what did catch me off guard with, I put on Twitter last night that I was pretty surprised that Bobby Witt Jr. was not an MVP finalist. Maybe it doesn't really matter when it's all said and done because he wasn't going to win it. He did not have better seasons than Aaron Judge and Cal Raleigh. You also can make the case that Jose Ramirez did have the better season, which they clearly did. He had more home runs than Bobby Witt Jr. He had more stolen bases. He had it higher on base. He had a higher slug. But it really comes down to what value you put into each and every stat. So, for example, Jose Ramirez hit 283. Bobby Witt Jr. hit 295. Bobby Witt Jr. led the league in hits. Jose Ramirez was 13 to 15 hits behind him, I believe. OPS plus, they were separated by 1. And Jose Ramirez had 137. Bobby Witt Jr. had 136. Defensively, Bobby Witt Jr. was a much better defender, even though Jose Ramirez was a Gold Glove finalist. So WAR is probably the next thing we turn to. Bobby Witt Jr. was the 4th most valuable player in baseball. Jose Ramirez was the 11th most valuable player in baseball. The only guys that Bobby Witt Jr. was trailing was Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, and Cal Raleigh. In fact, there are more infielders on the National League side that were worth more and wins above replacement than Jose Ramirez. That was Trey Turner and Perdomo out of Arizona. So if you put a lot of stock into that, then you would feel that Bobby Witt Jr. got snubbed. And, going back, I was surprised at how many Royals fans, themselves would say, well, he didn't deserve to be in the top 3. He didn't have as good of a season as the rest of them. And you can make that case. And I know I'm coming across as a homer here. I am advocating for Bobby Witt Jr. on a Royals podcast. It doesn't get any more homerism than that. I am seeing both sides here, though. It's what I'm trying to convey here. You can make a case that Jose Ramirez had a better season based on certain numbers, which is really what it comes down to. It was the top 2 and Aaron Judge and Cal Raleigh, and then you got to the 3rd spot. But to that point on a player being underrated, Bobby Witt Jr. has been a top 3 or top 5 most valuable player in baseball the last 2 years. And if you wanted to be very specific, the last 2.5 years, because he had that surge in his second year in the second half in 2023. He has been a top 5 player in baseball without any debate there for 2.5 years. And yet he has not started in an all-star game, and he has only been an MVP finalist once. I feel that we just haven't given him, or the national perception, that's probably the best way to put it. The national perception hasn't really been as glowing as it should be. Now, I don't want to lump everybody in here because I feel anytime I turn on MLB Network, they're raving about Bobby Witt Jr. They understand how talented he is. And he won the Gold Glove. I didn't believe it was going to be that much competition, but he really needs to be. He's going to be the starting shortstop for Team USA in the WBC. He will be one of the best players on that roster. He'll be alongside Aaron Judge. I believe Cal Raleigh as well is going to be playing for Team USA, so that's awesome in itself. But I would love to see some of these seasons get rewarded. And I think what is just hilarious about the debate, and it's fantastic for Kansas City, is all year long, I hear people go, well, he's just not as good as he was last year. Right? Well, he didn't deserve to be a starter because Jacob Wilson was hitting 350. Right? He's got nobody to blame but himself. And when it was all said and done, and maybe 2024 was the outlier. Him hitting 330 is going to be really hard to replicate. Right? I feel that he can still get there. I believe he is one of the best players in all of baseball. And I believe that when it's all said and done, he can be the best Royal of all time. He's going to have to win an MVP award or multiple to surpass George Brett. And George Brett had a 390 season, and that likely is never going to be replicated again in this current age of baseball. But what was funny about it is he hit 295. He led the league in hits. He stole nearly 40 bases, was worth 8 wins above replacement, and was an all-star again. He's going to win a Silver Slugger. And we still had people go, well, he had a bit of a down year, which you wouldn't be incorrect. If you were basing the numbers on 2024, there were numerous categories that he regressed in. But it could be that that's the outlier. He had a near 11 WAR season, I believe, in 2024. So that's 3 whole wins above replacement that he was, putting up in 2025. But I don't want that to become a thing where we could look at a season like that, a top, 15 season in Royals history, and say, well, he just wasn't as impressive this year. It's because that 2024 was so ridiculous. And yeah, it was the same treatment going into the All-Star game in 24 as it was in 25. Gunnar Henderson had been better in the first half than Bobby Witt Jr. But then Bobby Witt Jr. went on a ridiculous tear in the second half. And we were chuckling about it that at the end of the year, it's like he wasn't even the starter for the American League. And same thing happened in 2025, not to an extreme extent, though. Like in 2024, I want to say he hit 360 or something, or 370 in the second half. He hovered around 290-ish, I believe, in the second half in 2025. Jacob Wilson got hurt and really fell off in the back half of that season. But you look back and go, man, that type of season, the 4th most valuable player in baseball, was not even the starter in the All-Star game, and was not an MVP finalist. I know that I get hung up on things like that. To a lot of you, it doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter if Bobby Witt Jr. is a finalist, or if somebody's a Cy Young finalist and they don't win it. You don't remember it. And truthfully, that is the case. You remember the MVP winner. You don't remember who finished third. This is more so of me advocating for a player I cover that we talk about over and over again. And I would love to see him get more praise than maybe he's gotten so far in his career. Now, he is going to be on one of the biggest stages coming up in a couple of months, starting at shortstop for Team USA in the WBC, trying to take back the crown from Japan, who beat them in the previous WBC. But maybe going into 2026, it will be unanimous. You won't even have to worry about it. He puts together his best season of all time and wins the MVP award. I know he'll be one of those betting favorites, probably not over Aaron Judge, because until Aaron Judge loses, then he needs to be the betting favorite over and over and over again. But I don't know. I feel to get down off my soapbox here, to get everybody's thoughts and opinions, I'd love to hear people in the comments say if you believed he was snubbed or not. I'm not saying Jose Ramirez is nowhere close to deserving. He had a phenomenal season and beat Bobby Witt Jr. in a handful of categories. But I feel in this case, he should have been the third place finisher based on what he did and comparing those numbers to Jose Ramirez. But if you want to be technical about it, J-Rom had a higher OBP, had a higher slug, had more home runs, had more stolen bases, and was 1 point better with OPS plus. But for an MVP finalist, it's not all about offensive numbers. I believe you have to weigh the defense a lot too. And Bobby Witt Jr. was one of the best defenders in the entire sport and better than Ramirez in that regard. All right, so let us know in the YouTube comments, was Bobby Witt Jr. snubbed? Let us know below. When we come back, we're going to continue our talk about the WBC. It was announced yesterday that Jac Caglianone will be playing for Team Italy alongside Vinnie Pasquantino. Do we believe that will stunt his development, or will this boost him going into the regular season? That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Want to tell you about the title sponsor today in Gametime. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans and cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply, so again, use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, and download Gametime today. It was announced yesterday on Twitter that Jac Caglianone would be playing for Team Italy going into the WBC. And as we all know, that's the team that Vinnie Pasquantino will be playing for. And this was broke on Twitter by Sean Spradling, does a great job for WBC coverage. I strongly recommend everybody to follow him before the WBC actually happens. You'll never miss any sort of report out there, but it's at Sean_Spradling on Twitter. So we broke the news that Jac Caglianone will be playing for Team Italy. Kind of felt that was going to be a given. He is not in a position to start for Team USA. I'd imagine that, who would it be starting for Team USA? I'd have to think about that. I don't want to spend multiple minutes trying to, maybe it pops up in my head as we're going throughout this segment. But it's not even a guarantee that Caglianone will be starting for Team Italy. Vinnie Pasquantino will be at first base. He is a right fielder, so I guess he could start out there in right field. But I know that I've been asked this a few times when it comes to the WBC and how it can stunt a player's development. Because if you go to the WBC, you are not getting that traditional spring training. Your schedule is a bit wonky. I remember that from a pitching standpoint, Brady Singer talked about how it stunted his offseason a little bit. Now, he was very adamant going into 2023, I want to say it was. He was very adamant that he was not going to use that to blame. It was a tremendous honor. He would do it again in a heartbeat, but he said it was a bit unique where you start spring training and then you're away from the team, you're playing in a tournament, and you're playing for multiple weeks, and then you join the team late, and then the regular season starts. And Brady Singer was not really a starter. He pitched out of the bullpen and didn't pitch all that well. But there were multiple guys in the WBC that had the opportunity to play for their country. Carlos Hernandez did. MJ Melendez did, Nelson Velasquez did, Vinnie Pasquantino did, Salvador Perez did. Bobby Witt Jr. was a reserve on Team USA the last time they played. But as I mentioned in the previous segment, he is going to be a starter going into this WBC. So where I stand on it, it's so tough to pick one side and be so adamant about it, to be so passionate about why it's great and why it's not great. Because on one side, you look at the benefits of it. You get to play for your country. And no matter who you are a fan of, whether you're a Royals fan, Tigers fan, Guardians fan, Blue Jays fan, Dodgers fan, we have to realize that that is very important to these players, right? Because for many of these guys, they're coming from different countries. They didn't grow up rooting for a major league team. We grew up rooting for the Royals, or maybe you're not a Royals fan, you just listen to this podcast, but they get a chance to play for their favorite team. I mean, you see how much this means to guys from the Dominican Republic, from Venezuela. I mean, you see the emotion. It's awesome to see, which is why the WBC is one of my favorite events to watch. So that part I never want to take away from the players. It is a privilege and an honor for them to wear their country across their chest. I love hearing those interviews too for players with Team USA, and they talk about it being one of the coolest moments, if not the coolest moment they've ever been a part of. They get to represent their country going up against the best. And it's not like the Olympics, right, where we've seen in basketball, for the most part, and for a large portion of time, Team USA in most years would dominate. I mean, they'd beat some teams by 60 and 70, and there will be some teams in the WBC, including Team Italy, that'll be a little bit outmatched because the heavy favorites will be Team USA, Japan, of course. Japan very well could repeat. And then you have the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico has always been good. Those are the top four. Those are the four that when you run into them, it's going to be an absolute dogfight. It's phenomenal baseball, high-level baseball, and they're managed now by a lot of former players that we all would recognize. I want to say that Albert Pujols is managing Team DR, so that I would need to double-check on that, but I'm pretty sure that he is one of the managers going into the WBC, and Mark DeRosa will be the manager again for Team USA. But to that point, where you have all this pride, you have a player representing their country, getting to play for their family, their friends. It's awesome for them, and I never want to take that away. If you want to go play, that is an honor. And for us to say, well, it's going to mess up your spring training and you need to be back with our team getting ready for the season. Yes, they understand the regular season is important, but it's not like they're going and partying and just playing in some charity event where they're goofing off and they're not getting real reps in. If anything, they get to start their regular season early. They're playing in high intensity games and high level pitch. They're facing high level pitching. They're facing high level hitting. And in spring training, you're not getting that, right? Spring training, it's a glorified scrimmage. Pretty much every single day, you go out there for 2 or 3 innings, and then you go home, you go to your apartment, and you're done for the day. But I can also acknowledge, on the flip side here, that it can stunt players like Jac Caglianone, like it did for MJ Melendez, like at the time it did for Brady Singer, that you're not getting that traditional spring training. You are not able to go when pitchers and catchers report and just stay there till the end of March, and then you travel back with the team, and then you start the regular season. Because having that full spring training, you will hear GMs and coaches, managers, scouts, they'll all say, well, he got a full spring training. Or when a guy's struggling, well, he didn't have a traditional spring training, right? There was an injury he was battling with, and he didn't get started till 3 or 4 weeks in. And for the WBC, you go from, I'm slowly starting up, now I'm playing in a intense tournament bracket play situation, to then I'm going back to spring training, and then I'm starting the regular season. And it can be a little bit uneven, and here's why. Jac Caglianone could go to Team Italy and not start at all. He might be playing on the bench or playing off the bench. He might be a pinch hitter. He might only play in a few games. So you're going out there, and you're not getting those regular at-bats you would get in spring training. I will say this, though. It's easier for hitters to get back into the swing of things than it is pitchers, right? Pitchers have to have that buildup. They are the ones that have to throw every 5th day. They have to get X amount of innings in. They got to have the bullpen session. They got to do the simulated game. They need all of that to be built up for the regular season. For hitters, I mean, yeah, you want to get 3 to 4 at-bats a day, really get comfortable, see good pitching, see it well, have some confidence. But I can also see a world in which it really boosts you. To go out there and play in front of sold-out crowds, face great pitching on Team USA, Team Puerto Rico, Team Dominican Republic, and Team Japan. And if you come through in one of those games, I remember MJ Melendez did. I remember Carlos Hernandez had a big strikeout against Mike Trout, I believe, or maybe it was somebody for Team Puerto Rico. It was an awesome game to watch, and that's why I love it. The atmospheres are unmatched. I mean, it is wild, it is chaotic, it is loud. The players get into it, it's intense, and you get a chance to feed off of these other players. You get to learn from some of these players, and Bobby Witt Jr. credited that as well. Even though he wasn't a starter, he was around a bunch of first ballot Hall of Famers, guys that were multiple-time All-Stars, and that's great for a young guy to learn from. And for Vinnie Pasquantino to be there for Jac Caglianone only strengthens that chemistry for sure. But I would also say that it's something I'm going to be watching for. He more than anybody else. I'm not worried about Bobby. I'm not worried about – I know the Royals are actually sending a pitcher or two, I feel like. Maybe I'm misremembering something. But the Royals will have multiple guys in the World Baseball Classic. And Caglianone's going to be the one I'm watching to see if that really affects his development and how he'll look going into the regular season. But I'm never going to say that a player shouldn't go because they get to represent a country that means a lot to them, whether it be their grandparents that are from that country or a mom or dad that is. It can get a little bit confusing. I know last year or last WBC, everyone was puzzled that Lars Nootbaar was playing for Team Japan, but he does have that heritage. You also had Marcus Stroman pitch for Team USA one year, and then he was Team Puerto Rico. So these players get to pick. Seth Lugo pitched for Team Puerto Rico as well, even though his nickname, I believe, is the Puerto Rican, or the Puerto Rican is how it would be pronounced. So you have guys that will be pitching for different countries, and if you weren't sure that Caglianone was Italian, that would surprise me that you wouldn't know that. But he, I believe, was approached by both Team Italy and Team Puerto Rico, but he had said that Team Puerto Rico reached out a little bit late, and he had already made the decision to play for Team Italy. So that was the news as of yesterday, broken by Sean Spradling. So those two Royals will be on Team Italy. Bobby Witt Jr. will be playing for Team USA, and we know Salvador Perez will be playing for Team Venezuela. Are you excited for the World Baseball Classic? And if so, leave me your champion. That will happen in March, so it'll be fun to watch that. We'll definitely be covering it and be talking about it multiple times throughout the tournament. But who do you have to win it all? Japan won it last time. Does Team USA reclaim the crown? Or are you going to go with the sleeper pick in Team Italy? I certainly won't stop you. Let's take our final break of the show. When we come back, some bad news to go over is that Alec Marsh might miss all of the 2026 season. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. Want to tell you about our second sponsor today in PrizePicks. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates. That includes California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it is good to be right. Some of the negative news that we have to go over involves a pitcher from the Royals rotation in 2024, which would be Alec Marsh. And he was somebody going into 2025 that you felt could have competed for the 5th and final spot. Once they signed Michael Lorenzen, that got a bit clouded. I feel that when they signed Michael Lorenzen, they made their choice that Lorenzen was going to be the number 5. You had Chris Bubich in the rotation, you had Walker, you had Lugo, and you had Riggins. But Marsh was going to be there for depth. But now that I think about it, because he was never healthy in spring training, the Royals brought back Michael Lorenzen due to that uncertainty of Alec Marsh and when he would be healthy. And the worst case scenario happened because he didn't pitch in all of 2025, never got ramped up. And now we got the word yesterday from Annie Rogers that he had labrum surgery last month and is expected to miss most of, if not all of 2026 with that recovery. This is an awful thing for a pitcher, not just to miss an entire year, but 2. And you look at the success rate of a lot of pitchers in missing 1 year and 2. He can go to Kyle Wright and ask some questions about that. I mean, Kyle Wright was at the top of his game in 2022, I believe it was, then was not good in 23, missed the year, missed all of 2024, got ramped up a little bit with the Royals in 2025, but had a hamstring problem. Then he had a shoulder problem again. I mean, he's just never been healthy. And for Alec Marsh, at his age and where the Royals are at in terms of their pitching depth, to miss back-to-back seasons, now you're starting to wonder about what the future could look like for him, because it is incredibly difficult to come back from labrum surgery for sure, but to have that much time off and to return to form. You've got your outliers, you've got your stories, but it's going to take some time here. And if he is healthy going into 2027, which is just crazy to think about when we're talking about the next time Alec Marsh will be on the mound in Kansas City, if at all, would be spring training of 2027. I'm not sure why it took this long to get surgery. I know that in the report from Andy Rogers says that Marsh felt shoulder tightness last offseason and began the year on the injured list with right shoulder impingement. However, he faced setbacks in his recovery and never even made a rehab appearance. Marsh turns 28 in May, and he'll be eligible for arbitration for the first time after next season. So he had the discomfort, never got ramped up, as we said, and then you have setbacks, right? Anytime you did try to ramp up, and I remember there were a couple of reports from Andy throughout the season of he's going to have a live bullpen. They didn't go well, didn't respond well. Now it's back to square one. And that was something I found fascinating when I was down in spring training covering the team last season. And also, I believe it came up in 2024 as well. But when you have these setbacks, it's not we're going to go back to the previous day, right? If I'm building up to throw a bullpen and I don't respond well, my shoulder doesn't respond well, my elbow doesn't respond well, okay, well, let's just go back to the previous day. I'll take a day off and we'll try this bullpen session again the next day or 2 days later. It's not that case. You go back to square one. If you have any sort of setback, you know that something wasn't right, because these guys take their rehab very seriously. And the training staff is phenomenal in getting these guys prepared, getting these guys ready. Unfortunately, in baseball, injuries still happen. You are throwing a ball incredibly hard. You're throwing multiple different pitches. There's going to be stress. There's going to be strain, sometimes without knowing. You're using, your shoulder, your elbow too much because you're not using your lower half as well as you should be. These are all things that might not even be visible to the eye until something happens, and then you get a good look at what the player might be doing wrong. But in these cases of setbacks, the reason Alec Marsh never got close to returning is he would build up, and then he would have a throwing session, live bullpen, simulated game. I'm not even sure he got to a simulated game portion. You have the setback. You go to square one. You have to rehab all the way again until your arm could be built up enough to throw that live session. Cole Reagans is the perfect, timeline for a guy going through a rehab process and how you have to build up. It was build up for a couple of weeks. You throw 15 pitches. Then you rest a little bit. You see how you respond. All right, now we're going to do 30. Then we're going to do 45. Then we're going to do 60. You hope to get up to 70, and you're throwing a rehab start in Omaha, or you're throwing one in AA Northwest Arkansas. That's the way you got to build it up. But unfortunately for Marsh, he never got to that point. He never responded well, and shoulder injuries can be tricky, right? It can be incredibly tricky to deal with, and you're hoping that it's a full, speedy recovery. I'm hoping it's not all of 2026. I hope he has a 100% success rate when it comes to rehabbing and recovering, and we could see him late in 2026 to help the Royals in a playoff push. But first and foremost, he's got to get healthy, and I'm sure in his mind, I want to be ready to go for spring training in 2027. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every day. For your second, find the all-night Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night until a World Series champion is crowned, which happened on Saturday. Get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we will go over a couple of those articles talking about free agents and where the Royals could fall in acquiring some of those guys. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.